but because there's so much media out there, and a lot of them as Asian women being sexualized, it kind of puts this idea out for men to continue thinking that way. So everything that happened in Georgia is because of that, is because this person was taught to fetishize Asians and whatever means that meant for him, whether that was pornography or other things, of thinking that Asians are weak women, when women are weak or they can dominate, or that they're beautiful because, or sexy and all this other kind of things because of what they're watching.
So if I understand what you're saying, if somebody asks you, what type of Asian are you?
Yeah, it's kind of a leading question. It's kind of this concept at times, like they already have some sort of opinion. They might think you're Japanese when you're actually Korean, but then they'll be like, oh, I didn't know that. Or like, oh, I should have known that. I have that one Korean friend. Or like,
oh my God, no, you're kidding.
Obsessed, because there are a lot, there's a whole entire thing, and I forget what it's called, but there's a group of white males who have these yellow fever fetish. I forget the name of it.
What is yellow fever fetish?
So yellow fever is basically this concept of these white males, or typically males, I should say, because they have been not just white, who are obsessed with Asians. They're obsessed with Asian culture. Like some of them, I've met someone who's been like, I'm actually Asian. And I look at them, I'm like, hell no, you're not. No. You cannot identify as Asian because it's very clear you are not Asian. You just like the Asian culture. But like obsessed.
No, wait a minute. I need you to back this up a second. Give me some facts here because you're blowing my mind. First of all, yellow fever is an illness that kills people. Okay? So the fact that somebody would make that correlation or even use that terminology is so offensive. I don't know what you think, Dasna, but it's right up there.
It would go that far.
So what are you talking about? Give me more details. Yellow fever. What you're talking about? Anglo men, like white men who?
Not just white men. So I will also acknowledge African Americans have yellow fever. I've experienced that a lot. I don't know. Okay, if I remember correctly, and I have to look this up. I think David Henry Wong, who wrote Madame Butterfly, used the term yellow fever to describe this fetish against Asian women. Because there's a lot of this concept, and I believe if I'm correct, I think it has to go back to like geishas and Japanese of how they present themselves, and how it kind of is like this concept of you, like Mulan, which I hate saying, but the best time most people will be able to relate is you have to marry into a wealthier family. And you know how like Mulan dresses up to meet her husband, a similar type of process. And a lot of those get sexualized to be like, ooh, which woman do I pick? What do I want? And then you got the orderway brides.
Oh my God, I never even thought about how horrible that scene is until you just said that.
I was just about to ask because I haven't seen it in years, and I'm going to have to go see it tonight. Was Mulan considered a completely offensive film?
Okay, so this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because when it came out, it was one of the first for me growing up, first representation of someone looking like me. But if you think of the whole entire thing of like, it is a little bit. And part of it is also like the culture, to be honest, like having her, well, there's also women empowerment because she does come in and like go in for her father's place. So it's kind of like, it depends on who you're asking and depending on how you look at it.
Does Mulan represent the AAPI community in a positive light or in a negative light?
So this is where it gets really tricky, particularly for me, because we don't get representation often. So because we don't get representation often in film, I feel like I have to say yes, because it does give younger women, as well as myself as a kid growing up, someone to look up to, someone to say like, I can be a princess. Someone like me can actually be a princess.
Or a warrior.
Yes. I can be a badass individual. I can fight. I can take my dad's place and give honor to my family in a different way. I can break these boundaries. So I will say in that regards, yes. In other regards, such as I refuse to see the newer Mulan because the main actress is against the whole uprising with everything going on in Hong Kong.
Once again, protesters and police clashed on the streets in Hong Kong. On Sunday afternoon, thousands turned up to rally against a contentious national security law proposed by Beijing.
We are worried that the Chinese Communist Party make use of the evil law to further suppress Hong Kong people.
The Communist Party claims the law, which was introduced Friday, is needed to quell, quote, radical local separatists. The protesters, along with a growing list of global leaders, see it as a push to erode the region's autonomy and warn imposing it could cause more consequences.
If they do, I can't see Hong Kong remaining an Asian financial center the way it has been for many, many years.
So it's very likely there will be many more of these scenes playing out on the streets of Hong Kong. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Vancouver.
So that's also very political, and that's something like I will not watch the second Mulan. There are also a lot of me being...
But there's a question there.
Yeah, me also being a Korean adoptee, and my upbringing being more American, I have issues with like parts of it. Like the whole, I was saying, like having this, and part of it is culture. I don't like the fact that a lot of these Asian, the culture, you have to dress up and like basically your parents own you. Like I have heard stories of those who identify as Asian getting married so they have freedom. But even getting married is still that now their husband is owning them. But at least get a little bit more freedom. So
Honey, welcome to the Latin community.
But even in the beginning of like Mulan, you see that. So like for me being like a Korean adoptee, that puts me off. Because I'm like, I want my own freedom. Why should someone tell me what I have to do to bring honor?
But you were talking about the new Mulan. The film itself, if you don't see that film, how do you know I understand the position that you're talking about that the actress has politically with Hong Kong. But if you don't see the film, how do you know what light it's representing the AAPI community in?
I won't see the live action because of my beliefs with regards to having actors or having individuals who might not believe things I believe or might go against that. I don't want to support because I think that's a part of the issue when it comes to our media or like representation.
Help me out here, Daz. Help me out.
So here's where I think Robert's coming from. His question is, so if you do not know this fact from the lead actress in the new adaptation of Mulan, and you don't know where this actress has a stance on a very controversial, hurtful issue that's going on with Hong Kong, at the same time, if you do not know this, you are still watching this movie, and it still has a representation in the media just like the animated film had. So that being said, I think without knowing that information and you don't have it, like what would you, my question would be, which might deviate a little bit from Robert's, is how do you think we should respond to the AAPI community with representation in the media? Do we take it as at face value? Because, I'm going to be honest, I see Mulan and I'm like, great, representation for, like, I'm not going to know that when I consume media. So if you're not in the community, how do you know?
I think a good way to
She got me.
That's a great question. I think the good way to look is who is the creatives? Who wrote the script? Who is directing it? And if it is have people of color or have people who identify in that background, then you know it's going to be more truthful.
But is it not your responsibility as an activist? And I'm talking about you specifically for the AAPI community. Is it not your responsibility to see that film simply to understand that of the 50 million people that are going to watch it, 10 million won't know anything about anything other than what they see on the screen? And is that depiction going to be positive or negative for the AAPI community? Like I boycotted Goya because the CEO said stupid things, but I eat that food and I decided not to eat it.
We're Badia now.
Right.
But I think that's also like a really loaded question, because that would make me, if I, just because I do anti-racism work, I have to see everything. And the anti-racism work that I do is not just for the Asian community. So a lot of the work I also do is for the Black community, and acknowledging my privilege and how can I use my power to uplift them. And I think part of it is all of us do this work differently. So part of my value is acknowledging, okay, this main actress is against the uprising, or against all the attacks that are happening that was happening in Hong Kong, with China coming over and taking over. And I personally know someone from Hong Kong and how that affected her family. So for me, I don't want to watch and support a film that is doing that can cause harm. But that does not make me like, because I'm doing this work, that I have to see it. It just shows like, these are my values and this is what I'm sticking by and this is why. And I don't know if that's kind of what you're...
No, that makes perfect sense. It's good. I wanted to take a step back to, we are talking about media representation, and you would agree that media representation plays a role in sexual fetishization? Yes?
Yes, 100%.
Could we tie that back into the issue that happened? Do you have?
So a lot of, like, for example, there's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful clip that TCG and I believe the Asian Coercion American artists came together, and it's called Beyond Orientalism. And if you can, it's an 8-minute video, watch it. And it talks about the fetishize, what Asians are represented, or who ends up taking Asian roles and how they change it into yellowface, blackface, etc. And it's beautiful. And what it does is, like, it shows you the history, and then at the end it shows you what would be great of representation of our community. We can be heroes, we can be all these different things, but because there's so much media out there, and a lot of them as Asian women being sexualized, it kind of puts this idea out for men to continue thinking that way. So everything that happened in Georgia is because of that, is because this person was taught to fetishize Asians, and whatever means that meant for him, whether that was pornography or other things, of thinking that Asians are weak women, when women are weak, or they can dominate, or that they're beautiful because, or sexy and all this other kind of things because of what they're watching.
Did you notice that those stories were sidelined, like, during the pandemic? There was a lot going on there, right? Do you know what was your experience like with that?
Yeah, so there were articles, there were videos, because it's so easy now. We all have phones, so you can record it. And because it's being recorded, you can see it. And now it's recorded, it's easier to understand, instead of someone just saying, oh, I was attacked. There were, I believe, like over 2,000 or more reports of a lot of Asian individuals who were attacked during COVID. And I believe 68 or something like that, something really close to that, was actually women who were actually reported being attacked. I know there's a story that hit really close home to me, that someone was on the subway in New York City and they were lit on fire by a lighter.
Oh.
And she had to take her, like, it was on her shirt, and she had to figure out how to take the fire out so she didn't burn.
Kayla, this question may sound simple, but I think some people may not be putting this together. So tell me, how much do you think that the increase in violence, which I'm hearing it's about 1,500 to 2,000% increase, how much do you think that directly correlates to the fact that we have an Asian American vice president who's also a woman? I mean, how many more hate-based, racist people can you possibly offend than with Kamala Harris?
Yeah.
You know what I'm sorry I'm laughing, but think about it. It's ridiculous in its horribleness. But
it's an interesting conversation because at times she's forgotten that she actually identifies also as mixed and also as part of the Asian community, because she at times is just acknowledged as a Black woman. And that's also part of the one drop rule of how you just have one drop of any type of Black blood, even any mix. If you're a Blasian, Black and Asian, or Black and Latina, whatever that might mean, you're automatically considered Black. I don't really know about that correlation, especially because a lot of these hate crimes happened way before. So we're talking like the start of the pandemic, and a lot of that happened because of Trump and a lot of people calling this the Chinese virus. Right. So whether that escalated things, possibly, maybe, I don't know. I particularly think a lot of it has to do with calling this virus the Chinese virus, because you're attacking a particular group of people. And also the minority. Like, a lot of these stories were not told and were pushed under the rug for news because they wanted to keep Asians to be model citizen. And if a lot of these stories came out, particularly when Black Lives Matter movement were happening, there's solidarity possibility that could happen, which we're hoping to do, because we're more powerful together fighting this.